I've had a few run-ins with the paranormal. This one was way different. I had just gotten out of my training and was shipped to my first duty assignment. I was living in the barracks for a while until a good friend of mine and I decided to move into an apartment away from the military post. A few months go by and he basically just moves out without saying anything, leaving me with all the bills. It was a struggle, but I knew I could make it happen. I had to. He took all of his things and I was left with the TV, a small end table, and my air mattress. I didn't see any point in buying anything else because I was deploying at the end of the year. I started to sleep in the living room instead of the bedroom because the TV was out there. The hallway was near the head of the mattress, and I always slept with the dim light on so I could see when I got up in the morning. After a few weeks of that, I started to get an uneasy feeling in my apartment. Along with dealing with depression, financial issues, and the idea of deployment, you could say I was in a tough place, mentally anyways. When I was a kid, I had always heard of sleep paralysis and how scary it is. I never really cared. I figured they were just kidding. I never thought it would happen to me. Boy, was I wrong. It was a normal night. I put on a movie, Benchwarmers to be exact. I fell asleep. The TV had a sleep timer and it turned itself off like normal. I had a terrible nightmare. I can't remember what it was about exactly. I just remember the horrible feelings I had from it. It woke me up. Well, kind of. I was awake, but I couldn't move. I felt as if I had sunk into the bed and the only thing that wasn't swallowed was my head. Like any other person would have, I tried to yell for help, even knowing I lived alone. I was hoping and praying someone would hear me. With no such luck, making small noises because I couldn't yell, I kept fighting until I was able to open my eyes. When I did, I felt pure terror. All I could see was a black figure standing in my hallway. It didn't do anything except stand there. I still wasn't able to move. All I could do was look in fear. I could feel it looking at me, even though it didn't have any facial features. After what felt like an eternity, it just kind of faded away, almost like it walked backwards towards the other bedroom. That's when I slowly gained control and I was able to move. My instincts told me to get the hell out of the apartment, but I knew I had to do something. I ran through my apartment, turning on all of the lights as fast as I could. Finally, I got to the bedroom. I crept over to the door, peeking through the crack. I grabbed the handle and pulled it closed. I hung a cross on the door. I packed up a few things for the next day and I left as fast as I could. I went to work like normal. I felt like I was going completely insane, so I didn't mention it to anyone. When I got back home, I can honestly say I was almost too afraid to go inside. I hurried up the stairs and basically kicked open the door because it was a now or never kind of thing for me. I walked in, closed the door. Everything seemed normal. Nothing was out of place. I went on about my day like it didn't happen. Falling asleep that night wasn't easy, but I eventually did. I had a feeling that this wasn't the last time I would be experiencing something like this. After the first time I had sleep paralysis and saw this shadow man, that's what I'll call it, everything seemingly went back to normal. I went to work, I came home, I slept okay, no problem. It went on like this for a short while. About 3 weeks after the first time, I saw it again, except I was wide awake this time. I was sitting on my bed and watching a movie, relaxing after a hard day's work. I got the feeling that I wasn't alone, so I slowly looked around the room and there it was, standing in the hallway again, but a few feet closer this time. I was frozen with fear. I didn't know what to do at that point. I stayed up the whole night looking around the room. That morning, I couldn't wait to go to work. Jump ahead a few months. I had almost gotten used to seeing it every once in a while. Of course, it still scared me half to death for a second. I eventually got sick of it creeping me out, so one night I yelled at it to leave me alone. I live here. Go away. Or something along those lines. Maybe some other choice words. After I passed out, I woke up, left the house to run some errands, and when I got home, it was a different story this time. All of my stuff had been moved around. Cabinets were opened in the kitchen. Basically everything was moved or destroyed. This was the end of my rope. I packed up my things and headed to the barracks. I was deploying in a week, so I didn't care much. Jumping forward once again. After a year-long deployment, I finally returned home, physically unharmed for the most part, but mentally scarred. My deployment was rough. I ended up living in the barracks for a short while, maybe a week or two. I eventually went back to the same apartment complex, but a different building. I felt okay in this one. The depression had become worse along with my PTSD from combat, and I ended up in an even worse place than I had been before I left. My friends kept me going, though. They made me come out with them pretty often. I ended up meeting someone. She was great. The first time I invited her to my apartment to have a movie night, she got to the door and refused to come in. She told me it wasn't anything I did. It was that she could just feel things, hear things, and sometimes see things. She told me that my apartment wasn't safe and that I shouldn't go into it. The way she said it, the fear in her eyes, I could practically see her heart beating out of her chest. I decided to take her home, and she said a prayer for me.
I was a 16-year-old boy at the time that this happened. School had just let out, and I was looking to make some extra cash so I could buy a PS4. My aunt and uncle offered me $300 to watch my little cousin Alex for the weekend as they went away on a trip, so I jumped at the chance. I was super excited about it, as applying for jobs hadn't really been working in my favor. So I figured this might be an easy way to earn some cash while I'm still hunting for a real job. The first day was normal and nothing exciting happened. Alex and I spent the day watching Netflix, cooking, and playing video games, and we did the same thing the next day, Saturday. I put Alex to bed and went back downstairs to play another video game. I had been so focused on the TV that I hadn't noticed the time when I finally shut off the system. 1 a.m. I started cleaning up the living room when I heard something fall in the hallway upstairs. I figured maybe it was Alex, probably going to the restroom, so I called up to him, but he didn't answer. Then a few minutes later, I heard a couple of thuds above my head. It sounded like footsteps, but heavy. A little too heavy for it to be a toddler. I called up to Alex, but again, he didn't answer. I turned on the stairway lights and walked upstairs to an empty hallway. I saw that all the doors were open except Alex's. This was weird, as Alex was scared of sleeping in his room alone and always had the door open for some reason. I specifically left it halfway open, but it was shut. I went and opened the door to find Alex sound asleep. I started getting a little uncomfortable, but I ignored it. I turned around to head back downstairs when I heard the thud again, but this time it was from behind me. I opened the door to Alex's room again, but he was still asleep. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up at the thought that someone was in the house with us. I knew I had to turn around to see what had fallen, but I was frozen, as if moving meant that whoever was behind me would kill me if I dared to look at them. I slowly inched around to my left, using my peripheral vision to see who it was. I kept turning, dreading seeing someone there, but when I finally turned around, the only thing I saw was a picture that had fallen from the wall. I sighed, relieved it wasn't a stranger in the house, but when I inspected it further, I realized the picture was on the other side of the hallway from where it was hanging. The hallway wasn't that big, but it clearly didn't just drop from the wall. It looked almost like it was thrown. I put it back on the wall and began walking back towards the stairwell. I had left my phone downstairs and needed it to charge before going to bed. But when I got to the top of the stairs, I stopped and I felt all the blood drain from my face, and my brain began accepting what my eyes were saying. At the bottom of the stairs was a small figure. It was a small shadowy figure, to be more exact. It had the shape of a child, maybe about the same age as Alex, but it was hazy. The only thing I could make out other than the shape were two almond-shaped yellow eyes. It didn't move. Neither did I. We stayed like that for what seemed like forever before it turned around and disappeared into the next room. I, however, didn't move. I stayed that way in disbelief. I didn't know whether to run after it or get Alex. That's when I remembered my phone. I needed it in case my aunt or uncle called if they didn't have a landline anymore and it was about to die. I took the first step and then another down the staircase. I tried to swallow, but my mouth was way too dry. And after what seemed like an eternity, I finally reached the bottom step and peeked around the railing. Nothing. I took a few more steps towards the dining room where I left my phone. The only light was that in the living room where I was standing, and I couldn't see into the dining room. I began to get creeped out again and thought it'd be best I just run back upstairs, but I was too scared to turn around. I walked closer to the dining room, the floor creaking under my feet. I didn't see anything in there, so I reached the table where my phone was and picked it up. I let out a huge breath, not realizing I had been holding it that entire time. I hit the home button to take a look at the battery life, but when I did so, it lit up my side of the room and, in horror, I realized the shadowy figure that had been at the bottom of the stairs was only a few feet away from me behind the china cabinet. His golden eyes continued to stare at me, but the figure still didn't move. I freaked out. I turned and bolted for those stairs, skipping steps as I ran up them as fast as I could. I slipped and fell on the floor, but scrambled to get back up and made it back to Alex's room. I slammed the door shut and locked it. I heard the bedsheets shuffle, and Alex was suddenly sitting up, looking at me. He asked me what was wrong. I said nothing and told him to go back to sleep. The whole weekend I was supposed to have slept in my aunt and uncle's room, but I stayed with Alex that night because I was too scared to go back out in that hallway. The next morning, I called my aunt and uncle to let them know that everything was going fine in the house. They told me they'd be back in a couple days. Nothing new happened the rest of the weekend, but that may be because I went to bed when Alex did instead of staying up for a little longer and slept in the same room with him. I didn't want him knowing that I was scared and trying to find comfort in someone 12 years younger than me. But the weirdest part is that I wasn't the only one who saw this figure. When my aunt and uncle came home, they let me stay the night again since their flight was delayed and they didn't get home until around midnight. They woke me up to let me know they had just gotten home. I went downstairs with my uncle as my aunt went to go take a shower. He was asking me if everything was all right or if anything weird happened. I told him no and that we were okay. He had poured me a sweet tea and himself a beer and began laughing. He said he was glad to hear it because Alex was swearing up and down he had an imaginary friend that wasn't imaginary and that this friend would visit him a lot at night. My uncle said he and my aunt were just about to believe him because it had been going on for months. I'm 18 now and about to go to college soon. But I'll never forget that weekend I spent watching my cousin. I never told my aunt or uncle what I saw. Hell, I never told anyone. But a part of me wonders if that little boy ever came back to visit. Hey everyone, thanks for watching my video. I really enjoyed the collab I did with FearCrawler. If you enjoyed it too, go check out his channel. We have another collab there where I'm featured in his video. I will link his channel below. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel and subscribe to him as well. He's a great narrator, and I know that you'll enjoy all the stories that he has to offer you guys.